Okay, we're just about ready to get started. I just want to do a quick overview of the live transcript feature for our Zoom attendees. If you are looking to view the live transcript, almost like closed captioning of the webinar today, at the bottom of your screen, it says CC Live Transcript. If you click on that, you can turn it on, you can turn it off. You can also find settings in there to make the text larger or smaller. With that being said, turn it over to Cheryl Osimo.
Thank you, Sarah Beal. Good afternoon. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today for our third webinar in the STEEP Let's Talk About PFAS series. In our previous two webinars, we were joined by STEEP scientists and local officials to discuss drinking water quality and the health effects of PFAS. If you missed either of these webinars, you can find them on the STEEP webpage at web.uri.edu/STEEP. or on the Town of Barnstable's Channel 18 video on demand platform. My name is Cheryl Osimo. I'm the Executive Director of the Massachusetts Breast Cancer Coalition, one of STEEP's community engagement core partners, along with the Sierra Club Cape Cod Group. I am also the Cape Outreach Coordinator for Silent Spring Institute. Launched in 2017, STEEP is a research program funded by the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences. The program is led by Dr. Rainer Lohmann and the University of Rhode Island in collaboration with the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health and Silent Spring Institute. On behalf of the STEEP team, I'd like to welcome you here today for this informative discussion on the essential and non-essential uses of PFAS in consumer products. We're joined today by Dr. Rainer Lohmann, who directs the STEEP Superfund Research Program, and Barnstable Town Manager Mark Ells. Our speakers today are going to talk about how scientists are proposing to accelerate the phase-out of PFAS and what communities can do to reduce exposures and protect the local government. A special thank you to STEEP for organizing this series, and to Town Manager Mark Ells and the Town of Barnstable here on Cape Cod for their continued partnership. Now I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Rainer Lohmann. Dr. Rainer Lohmann is Professor of Oceanography at the University of Rhode Island's Graduate School of Oceanography and Director of the STEEP Superfund Research Program. Dr. Lohmann's research is focused on the sources, transport, and bioaccumulation of anthropogenic pollutants. He has published over 100 peer-reviewed publications and serves as editor for environmental toxicology and chemistry. As the director of STEEP, Dr. Lohmann oversees and guides the center and leads to project development tools for detecting PFAS in surface water on Cape Cod. We're appreciative of Dr. Lohmann's leadership of the STEEP program, and we're thrilled to have him here with us today. After Dr. Lohmann's presentation, I will invite Nina Barrett, a senior at Upper Cape Tech and Barnstable Youth Commissioner, to welcome our second speaker, Barnstable Town Manager Mark Ells. We have reserved time at the end for questions from the audience. We encourage you to use the Q&A feature in Zoom to submit your questions throughout the webinar. We may not be able to get to all of your questions, but we'll take all questions into consideration and we'll do our best to answer them in future webinars. Thank you, and I'll now turn it over to Dr. Rainer Lohmann.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thanks for everybody in front and behind of the scenes for this webinar. And so let me start talking about, a quick word. As Cheryl mentioned, I'm leading the STEEP Superfund Research Center with Silent Spring and Harvard University, and on the website www.uri.edu/STEEP, you can see more about the kind of research and other activities we pursue. I highly encourage you to visit that website. So because I'm the first speaker, I want to introduce the main the main attraction for today. That is one of the PFAS molecules. In this picture, it's PFOA. And it is so famous that there's two movies made of it. One is The Devil We Know. It's a documentary. And then there's a feature film, Dark Waters, with Mark Ruffalo. Both tell the same story on how the contamination of PFOA of the neighborhood of the West Virginia DuPont plant led to a long-ranging legal battle that Robert Billot eventually won for the residents. I highly encourage you to see those movies. It's a nice storytelling of environmental detection and exposure. Right, the other thing we need to know about these chemicals is that they're very unique. You can see they're water repellent. That's why we use them so much. They're present in the environment everywhere, basically from the North Pole to all of us. We have exposure through a wide range of consumer products, and we touch on this a little more today, including outdoor jackets, traditionally Teflon coated pans, Scotch Guard, you name it. We know there's a wider range of effects on humans, and a previous webinar in the series explored some of those. And there was some, albeit limited, regulatory action on PFOA itself, PFOS, and a few other of the nastiest members of this class of chemicals. So what I was asked to talk talk about today was the concept of essential use of per and polyfluorinated alkyl substances, and that was led by Ian Cousins. And the title is actually very important because it accepts the concept of essential use for determining when uses of PFAS can be phased out. So the idea was, we know there's a problem, what can we actually do about it? And so this is a compilation of products that have been traditionally used with PFAS in them, and there's a wide range. A lot of them are, of course, found in everybody's home, be that carpets treated for so that they don't get dirty anytime soon, carpet cleaning products, food packaging, they've coating on furniture, so again, that they don't stain, cosmetics, outer gear, clothing, adhesives, protective coating even for leather, non-stick frying pans, a lot of things in cars, including car seats, and of course, firefighting foams, which has caused some of the problems we have seen in the groundwater on the Cape. Question is, do we really need to have PFAS in all of these applications? And it turns out the use of PFAS is much more widespread. And I don't want to go through all of this list, but it just shows that on the industrial side, there's a wide range of uses of these chemicals, polymers that contain fluorine. So we can't obviously get rid of them all at once, but there's certainly steps we can take. And that was the idea behind this concept of the essential use. And it was borrowing a concept that was established in the Montreal Protocol. And for those of you that are a little younger in age, the Montreal Protocol was established to prevent further degradation of the ozone layer, protecting Earth from ultraviolet radiation. And within this Montreal Protocol, so an international treaty, for the first time was this idea of there's an essential use where the use is necessary for the health or safety or the functioning of society. And essential use is also one for which there are really no available alternatives present right now. So quick look back. This was the famous case that was discovered in the 80s, was disputed for a few years. The scientists that discovered the ozone hole later got Nobel Prizes. And the Earth, or the global community, acted to protect the Earth's protective layer of ozone and came up with this treaty. And the treaty didn't say stop everything, but stop all of those uses which we can stop now. And for others, we phase them out over time. And that indeed worked. You see the amount of ozone depleting substances being used has decreased drastically, and the ozone hole is indeed recovering. So that's within a few decades, there's no trace left of damage to the ozone layer. So with that in mind, how can we use that for PFAS? And we basically said there's three categories. And the first one is really easy. It's what we call non-essential. It's not essential for health or safety or the functioning of society. It's mostly driven by market opportunities of somebody wanting to sell a given product. And you can basically do without any problems because alternatives exist already. And that is something like there's dental floss, there's water repellent surface shorts, ski waxes, and all of those cases you can do without PFAS and society won't notice. The next level is a little more complicated, but this is substitutable. So now these are important applications and the chemicals have important functions, but alternatives have been developed that provide pretty equivalent functionality and adequate performance. And there's two good examples, actually three by now. The use of PFAS in AFFF, so aqueous film forming foams, For a long time, that was kind of the benchmark. You needed fluorine in them, but now alternatives exist. They're basically as good, and the DoD will phase out most fluorine-containing foams. The same holds for water-resistant textiles, and in this case also cookware and bakeware that has traditionally used Teflon or similar coatings. And the third category, of course, are those where you really, at this point, have to say they're really essential, they're necessary for health or safety, and we don't have an alternative right now. Examples are medical devices. I think there's Teflon stents being used. Of course, we want to make sure people continue to have healthy lives, or firefighting gear for first responders. But the important angle is that this should be a temporary solution, saying, yes, at this point, we need PFAS in these applications, but with focus on research, development, and innovation, we can, in 5 or 10 or 15 years, develop alternatives that are just as good, but not as problematic. So that's the idea behind the essential use. To make this a little more specific, this is category 1, PFAS in personal care products such as cosmetics, hair products, sunscreens, skin creams, not needed. We have plenty of alternatives that function just as well without PFASs. And luckily, some of the retailers and producers have understood the challenge and are offering PFAS-free products. Category 2, substitutable. This is outdoor clothing. By now, very slowly, alternatives are coming to the market of rain jackets, outdoor gear for the average consumer that are produced without PFASs. So that is encouraging. And the third, of course, as I said, for example, firefighting turnout gear. At this point, of course, they have to be protected, so they still contain PFASs. The firefighting community is aware of their exposure and is concerned, so R&D is underway to see what else can be produced to provide the safety. I mean, last word, you'll often hear, and of course it's true, that something like a Teflon or other fluoropolymers are very inert. And that is true, but it's only once it's the finished product. During the manufacturing, the use, and after use, you have all kinds of problems. So we really think you have to look at the entire life cycle of the making the product, using it, and disposing of it to make sure you don't have problems with chemicals that cause concern at any of those stages. And maybe a quick word for those that don't like a lot of acronyms and don't necessarily like chemical structures. Some labels will say it's PFOA free. That doesn't mean it's free of all fluorine-containing chemicals, because PFOA is only one of the thousands of fluorine-containing chemicals that we are concerned with. All right, so back to the list I started off with. Are these all essential? Simple answer is there are a lot of non-essential PFASs, and if we can avoid them, we avoid exposure. We avoid regrettable substitutions, and there's some progress. As I said, I mentioned AFFF. Most carpets you buy these days are free of PFASs. A lot of cosmetics producers are not using PFASs anymore. Ski waxes are there without food contact materials. So there's a lot of progress. And there's a lot of retailers who have, for various reasons, taken up the charge and say they want to phase out having PFAS in the products they sell. That is particularly prevalent in Europe, but I think in the US there's also a few. And that's why I share this web link to a list that I assume is accurate, maintained by the Green Science and Policy Institute, that shows PFAS-free products, a wide range of them if you take a look. The other way is there's also the retailer report card.com. If you go in there, they look for a wide range of chemicals of concern, and they basically list and they give scores for a wide range of retailers, restaurants, whatever it is. So you can also go there. They list very specifically what the companies do or don't do. So there's some way of finding out how a given producer or retailer operates. So with that, I'm close to the end. I think if we want to achieve a reduction in the personal exposure and effects of PFAS, it really requires wide range of actions from the individual levels to retailers, producers, towns, and Mark Else will talk about this. State mandates like Massachusetts is very aggressive of trying to protect drinking water, federal action, and international. And the combination of all of those will then lead to the outcomes we aim for. With that, a big thanks from my end. And I'm passing it back to Cheryl, who will then eventually introduce Nina, who will then introduce Mark. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lohman. And now I have the pleasure of introducing a truly remarkable member of our Cape community, Nina Barrett, who will be giving some remarks and introducing our second speaker, Barnstable Town Manager, Mark Ells. Nina Barrett is a senior at Upper Cape Tech in Bourne, studying environmental technology. Through her shop and through her position at Envirotech, she's been testing water for bacteria and studying its effects for the last 4 years. She plans to major in environmental science in college. She's a Town of Barnstable Youth Commissioner, appointed by the Town Council to be the voice of the youth. The Youth Commission is working on numerous projects that are affecting our youth. This includes concern for our drinking water and the habitat we live in. We're thrilled to have you join us today, Nina. I often say that we do this work to make this world a better place for our children, grandchildren, and future generations, and we cannot do this alone. We need dedicated community leaders like Mark Ells, and we need engaged young leaders like Nina, who are driving change in their community and bringing a new wave of energy to protect for future generations, locally and globally. It's an honor to do this work together. Thank you. I'll now invite Nina to say a few words and introduce our esteemed town manager, Mark Ells. Nina?
Thank you, Cheryl. So I just wanted to add that this project is really important to people my age because it will be affecting our waterways and our health, and eventually will be a project we will continue to work on when it gets passed on to my generation. I want to introduce the town manager of Barnstable, Mark Ells, who has made this possible by working with the Youth Commission and has been doing a great job. Mark?
Well, thank you, Nina. I am so thrilled that you're here with us today, and that you're able to, actively participate with your fellow youth commissioners and certainly hopefully engage our youth in the community on this and, all the business that we do here in Barnstable. And I wish you well as you move forward, and certainly reach out to me on this and all issues. So thanks for being here. I'm going to share my screen with you. And you might find it interesting that a town manager is here to speak with you all today about PFAS. And the reason that I'm here is because Barnstable was, put in the middle of this this issue relevant to groundwater and drinking water, and being able to move forward with improvements to groundwater and drinking water as our knowledge of these emerging contaminants developed, and as regulations became more strict relevant to this issue. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with Cape Cod. If you live here, you certainly are. But here's Barnstable. We're in the middle of the Cape. We are surrounded by water. We live on top of water or next to water. Our water resources are essential. Barnstable, though, is also the commercial economic center for the region, the educational center for the region, the transportation center for the region, the healthcare center for the region, as well as the largest town on Cape Cod. So we play many roles, and making sure that Barnstable remains viable on Cape Cod in Massachusetts is critical. So when this issue of PFAS contamination became identified, and then as regulation and understanding moved forward, it was clear to me, coming from a background of certainly environmental science and municipal management, and then knowing the town of Barnstable and the sensitivity of Cape Cod and the town of Barnstable to everything we do here, this issue has become certainly a priority for us. And I'll explain a little bit why. This is a picture of Barnstable, and you can see, I think I showed you regionally where we're situated, but certainly this is Barnstable, north, south, east, and west. And when you look on the top side of this picture, it's the Great Marsh and Barnstable Harbor. That's a very large area, but when you remove that from the geographic area of the town, those tan areas are where our drinking water comes from. And it's very important in all decisions that we make as residents or visitors or businesses in Barnstable that we know that we live on top of this water resource, this water that we drink. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit, I'll use my cursor, of this well field in Hyannis. And this area here is the village of Hyannis. I'm going to talk to you in a minute about that and why the town of Barnstable moved nationally front and center on this issue. And hopefully you'll walk away better understanding how we've approached managing this, and then specifically how all of us can make a difference relevant to what Dr. Lohman was just speaking about, meaning these pervasive chemicals that are in the marketplace and ultimately in our environment and in our environment here on Cape Cod. But it's important to remember this picture because everything we do is impacting our water resources. Now, as town manager, I'm not just tasked with looking at PFAS, I'm looking at protecting the town of Barnstable's quality of life and unique character and involving our citizens like Nina and her fellow youth, but everybody in what we're doing, and then enacting policies that respond to and anticipate the needs of our community. And perhaps no other feature is more important to the quality of life and unique character of our community than the health of our coastal waters, our freshwater ponds, and drinking water. And we all benefit by our water resources being protected and preserved. And I go back to this particular map again, just again to illustrate how significant our water resource, our drinking water resource is to where we live. And it needs to be in all our minds at all times as we make decisions, living here, working here, recreating here. And I just can't encourage that or spend enough time educating our public on that. Now, why are we front and center on this? Well, a few years ago, up in this area, there was use of fire foams at 2 locations. And we began to see levels of PFAS in this series of wells. And so as the regulations became more stringent, and I'll also point out that as our ability to understand the impacts and the presence of these sorts of, I call them emerging contaminants. PFAS is one of those, but there are many contaminants of concern out there. As our ability to sample became, we went from parts per thousand to parts per million to parts per billion, and now we're at parts per trillion. We begin to see these chemicals of concern in our water resources, specifically in our drinking water resources. And in Massachusetts, as in many states across the country, we have a heightened level of concern as we better understand and we see how pervasive these chemicals are in our drinking water. And as a municipal manager, we're tasked with complying with regulation relevant to certainly whatever is before us, but certainly drinking water. And so we were confronted with a situation where the levels of PFAS were at or exceeded the regulation. And so what did we do? We proceeded immediately with action. And this is what really thrust us from a local discussion and concern to a national discussion. And I've had mayors and city managers and town managers, not just from Massachusetts, but from all over the country, reach out to us on our swift and effective action relevant to this issue here in Hyannis within the drinking water supply. We immediately moved on going forward with understanding. Thank goodness we have partners like Silent Spring and URI and Harvard, so that they can, from the scientific standpoint, help us better understand, what's occurring and what's coming relative to regulatory and the science side of this. And they are truly partners working with us to address these on the ground problems. We moved forward with the design and then installation of carbon filter systems that were determined to be an effective means of removing PFAS from water supply. We did it at 4 wells in the Mary Dunn well field, 3 wells in the Mar well field, and at the Straightway and Airport well, because we began to see trace amounts in those well fields. We've invested $22 million. It increased our annual operating costs by $600,000, but we needed to do this to protect our water resource. And I'm proud to say that we have no detection of PFAS in our public water system in Hyannis now as a result of these efforts. And that's when other communities across the country began calling us, wanting to know about the technical, the regulatory, the financial, the social impacts of having to address this specific issue that's in front of us today. We also had wonderful partners in the town of Yarmouth and the Centerville, Ossipee, Marston's Mills Water District. They immediately stepped up and assisted. Now we have permanent interconnects with them. We're also looking to the future and conducting studies to look to the future potential drinking water sources throughout our town. If you think about this, the general metro area of Boston, they don't live on top of their drinking water. They go 120 miles to the west and they bring it in from a reservoir. We live on top of our drinking water. Everything we do, everything that we do will impact that water resource. And as we begin to be able to evaluate down from parts per thousand to million to billion to trillion, this becomes a critical issue for us. I love the title of "You don't need it, don't use it." Couldn't be more applicable than on Cape Cod or in the town of Barnstable. And we need our residents and our visitors and our businesses to know this, to think about it, and to incorporate it into their consumption of goods when they're here on Cape Cod. The doctor did a wonderful job in already saying this, but what's PFAS? It's a class of chemicals that companies add to consumer products to make them non-stick, waterproof, stain resistant. What does that mean? That means it's not just fire foams, even though when you go down to the bottom of this, that's what originally triggered us to identify these issues in the groundwater. This is everywhere, in everything that we can walk into a store potentially and purchase. So we need to be thinking about this. It's in, it's in carpeting and upholstery and waterproof apparel, non-stick cookware, grease-proof food packaging, and dental floss. We need to think about this And then maybe more importantly, we need to think about what we're doing about it. Unfortunately, studies have linked these chemicals with ranges of health problems. Studies have also suggested that 80% of Americans have PFAS in their bodies. So I've also heard that polar bears have been tested and they find them in very remote places. So these chemicals, these forever chemicals, as they were referred to earlier, are everywhere. And as we can sample down to very trace amounts, we see them everywhere, and we want to understand their impact. So one of the things we can do, what can we do? We can choose not to use certain products that contain these chemicals of concern, but that's not easy. It's not easy at all. These chemicals of concern are in widespread use and not regulated at the point of purchase. So short of you becoming educated, as Dr. Lohman had started, and this series of webinars has certainly brought to the viewing public, short of educating yourself on this isn't going away. And I've already told you, on Cape Cod and in Barnstable, we live on top of the water we drink. So we have a different problem than other parts of the country. Barnstable, what have we done beyond the filters that I've described to you and the quick action and the positive results? We've actually been looking at our purchasing documents to include requirements for PFAS-free products. Now, based on what the doctor just said, I'm going to go back and look at that again, because PFAS-free versus the general group of chemicals that we're concerned about might leave us a little bit of a gap here. So I want to make sure I'm clear on what I'm conveying to those people who may be looking to sell us products. And if we can make sure we don't introduce this as consumers into our environment here, that would be a wonderful thing. We educate our public, especially our youth, with the hope that consumer buying behavior will be modified. And I have to say this, I've said it over and over again, the ability to modify behavior in an adult is so difficult. The ability for our youth to listen to this and to make responsible decisions relevant to purchasing behaviors, they are wide open to this discussion. And so much of my efforts are and will continue to be focused on our youth. This didn't happen overnight. This isn't going to be solved overnight. And this is our youth's future. So we need to take it seriously, and they need to be an active part, and they will ultimately in their lifetime see the solutions to this. In Barnstable, this is a challenge. A majority of the properties are on-site septic systems, and these chemicals are in many common products that we use. They exit our properties through our on-site septic systems and enter the environment. That's how simple it is. Now, don't be misled, because then people will say, well, you want to see sewers everywhere. Quite honestly, across the country, sewage treatment at most facilities don't remove these chemicals of emerging concern. Yeah, the technologies are being developed, but sewers aren't necessarily the immediate solution. That's a strong statement, so I had to put kind of a settling picture in here for you all to take a look at. These chemicals travel through our environment. We've already referred to them as forever chemicals. That means they don't just go into the ground. People have said to me, oh, they'll dilute. No, they don't, especially when you're sampling down to parts per trillion. And they don't break down. They don't attenuate to anything. There isn't natural, nature isn't going to be able to modify these in a way that won't allow them to get into, for example, our drinking water. We made them, we put them here, we need to remove them. I just showed you the costs relevant to physical removal through filters. Wouldn't it be much better if we could modify purchasing behavior, and when we don't need these products, don't use them and never introduce them into the system? They don't break down easily, and they end up in our sensitive receptors, specifically our water supplies. But I guarantee you, Nina, in the future, people are going to be asking you, what about the lakes and ponds and estuary areas where our various, life that lives in these water bodies is exposed to this 24/7? What's the impact on our natural environment, not just humans? That'll be a question posed to you, Nina, that'll probably be beyond my time in a leadership role, but it'll definitely be something that you'll be challenged with. And hopefully if we don't use it, we won't use it. And we will begin to solve that problem. Once again, we live on top of the water we drink in Barnstable. What we do with our household water matters. And individually, we can have an impact, but collectively, we can make a difference. So I'm calling upon all of our residents, all of our visitors, all of our businesses to become educated on this, to make wise purchasing decisions relevant to it. And you leave it to the end of the pipe solution, it is going to be extremely costly, whether it's at a water supply. And if the assumption is it can just go to a treatment plant and be removed, that is not the case right now. So you need to think about this, and you need to help us, because without your help, we will not get to this end as quickly. Now, I want to thank all of our viewing audience for being here. Obviously, this is a critical issue for us nationally, but certainly here on Cape Cod. Again, I can't say enough about having partners like URI and Harvard and Silent Spring. They make the difference. They don't come in with a problem, drop it somewhere, and then walk away, because people who do what I do are there to step in with solutions to these problems. They, shoulder to shoulder, arm in arm with us, work every day to help us become more educated so that we can bring forward those solutions to you, our public. So I can't say enough about having partners like that, truly partners. So I want to thank you all for this opportunity, and I'll turn it back to Cheryl at this point.
Thank you, Mark. We're appreciative of Mark's support of the STEEP Superfund Research Program and for the longtime support of the town of Barnstable. Mark follows in the footsteps of former town manager and state representative John Clem, who I often refer to as the founding father of Silent Spring Institute, and who laid the groundwork for us to be doing this work today. It's through Mark's continued leadership and partnership that we've been able to carry on this important work. Thank you to both of our speakers, Nina, and the entire town of Barnstable and STEEP teams. We are now going to open up for discussion with our panelists. Thank you to those of you who have submitted questions already. And the first question is for Dr. Lohman. Has the essential use concept actually been applied already to limit PFAS, Dr. Lohman?
The simple, honest answer is not yet. It is, but I think what it has helped do is give people a better perspective on what we can achieve in the shorter term, mid-term, and long term. And so it is pursued in Europe as part of European legislation, and it is raising a lot of questions, concerns, both from those who want to implement it and those who are producers right now. But I think it is a step towards thinking about what can we use in societies now without endangering our future. And that's because everywhere the idea of a circular economy is becoming more important, and then you cannot really have compounds like PFAS that don't break down. Then you mess up everything down the road for the future generations. So the short answer is not yet, but it's having an impact just because it changes the discussion of how we can deal with chemicals like PFAS. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lohman. Mark Els, this next question is for you. Why is it so important to involve our youth in this work?
I think for the two reasons that I tried to share during my presentation. I think that their understand this didn't happen overnight, and this isn't going away quickly either. I think that their understanding and their vested interest will ultimately yield positive results for us, and so we can't engage them soon enough. I also think, I'm not trying to be a behavioral scientist, but I do believe that our youth are very open to modification of purchasing behavior, where people such as myself are less apt to change our purchasing behavior. So by educating our youth, they're going to say, do I need it? And if I don't need it, I'm not going to use it much more quickly than certainly a person like myself. So those are the specific reasons, and it's their future. Very simply, it's their future.
Thank you, Mark. Dr. Lohman, are there resources to help guide local businesses, citizens towards consumer items that can help us reduce the use of PFAS?
To some degree, and I think I should quickly share this one slide again that had, give me a second, that had one of the websites that can be used. So this is one of the webs, oops, where did it show up? Yeah, that's pfascentral.org/PFAS-free products. That's one of the websites. I showed the other one, so that's one resource you have. That's the other one that is more general for the retailers. So those options exist. Some consumer products have labels that indeed say PFAS free. So that's another step. But to pretend this is all easy and there is a mandated labeling is not the case right now. So there's still things we have to work on. And let me stop sharing again. And that's the best I can tell you at this point. So there are some reasons, but it's not exhaustive.
Thank you, Dr. Lohman. Mark, what can towns and cities do at a municipal level to reduce their reliance on PFAS? Has the town of Barnstable changed any purchasing policies to avoid PFAS?
Yes, we have. We're looking at the specificity when you make purchases in municipal or in government in general. You're typically required to put together specifications to basically say, okay, this is what I want. We need to make sure that in those specifications, we use the right wording to buy products when we need them, that don't contain these types of chemicals, very simply. We also spend a lot of time educating and sharing information, but unfortunately, there isn't enough focus on certainly this issue, because I just think there's so many issues that confront us as residents anywhere in any city or town, that this is just another one that we're trying to manage. So education and very consistent and accurate, which again our partners help us with, very consistent and accurate information that allows our public to be educated, and then make good decisions relevant to issues such as this.
Mark, I'd like to expand upon that and ask you, how do you help residents make the connection between the products they buy and the quality of their water?
It isn't an easy connection. Most people want to blame, quite honestly. They want to blame a water supply. They want to blame a wastewater treatment plant. In both cases, we don't have industry here on Cape Cod. We do have point sources, though, every once in a while. And by that, I mean, we might be able to identify a location that has been using fire foam. And therefore, downgrading of that, we would have concerns. perhaps even problems, which we have experienced. But in general, people need to know that what they individually do on their own property, whether it goes in the ground in a septic system or whether it goes by a pipe to a treatment plant, if it contains these chemicals, is a concern. They need to know that. And they need to work with us to become educated and then make good consumer decisions. And then look to their leadership to understand this and incorporate it into what we do every day. And I'll give you an illustration, and it's probably a grave one, but I'll share it with you. Many of our adults will say to me, "Oh, this is a 30-year impact. I'm not going to worry about it." I have never had a youth who has taken the time to talk with me say that. They are always saying, "I want to stop this. What do I need to do?" So our public, our adult public, needs to recognize that it needs to start now, and they're the ones in most cases with the resources to make the purchases for these items. But it is our youth's future that we're talking about here. So I would just encourage everybody to take this seriously and to act appropriately.
Great answer, Mark. It's a good lead into the next question to Dr. Lohman. Can you walk us through actual lifestyle changes we can make to limit our exposure? So what should a PFAS-safe kitchen or living room look like?
What a great question. So, of course, it depends a little bit on the money you have available, but on the simple things, you can, next time you buy cookware, bakeware, use something that does not contain PFAS containing coating. So typically that's a Teflon coating. So not the Teflon frying, but use ceramic or stainless steel or one of those. At this point, PFAS might still be used in food contact materials, as in that could be the pizza box, the takeout containers. At this point, it's unclear which ones have it, which don't, because there's no labeling in place. So you basically just try to minimize that kind of food if you can. Don't use a Scotch Guard style spray to prevent staining. In this case, a stain is probably better than cancer or other adverse health effects down the road. I think those were the most obvious things you can do right now. And I know it's frustrating that the responsibility is on individuals, but that's the best you can do right now until there's legislation in place to make it mandatory to have certain chemicals not in use for everybody.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lohman. I appreciate it. Mark, do you have anything to add to this conversation, to Dr. Lohman's answer?
I think you could go, here's a suggestion to everybody. You can certainly go on the STEEP website and find information. I would encourage you to do so. You don't have to go that far. You can go right onto the Barnstable website, go to the home page, look at the button that says Barnstable Resources, click on it, look under Water Resources, click on it, and there are links to lists of products. They've been on our website. I don't know, I could probably find out how many people view it, hopefully more after they listen to this, but we provide this information. But what we really need to do, and it's been there in forms for a while, in various forms for a while, we really need to just a call to action to people, not alarm, but a call to action to educate yourself on this. And you tell us, maybe we should have a contest, Cheryl, of the best kitchen, and we'll have Rainer go out there and take a look at it, and he can rank them. And maybe URI will want to have that family send a kid to URI, Rainer. What do you think?
What a fabulous discussion.
As long as there's food involved, I'm all game.
Thank you both so very, very much. Rainer and Mark L. This has been a very, very wonderful discussion. People are excited. I'm already getting emails and texts here. This is wonderful. On behalf of the STEEP team, I'd like to thank you again for joining us today. Thank you to our speakers for all the great information and conversation. We're deeply appreciative of the town of Barnstable for their support of this program, and to the STEEP Research Translation Corps and Community Engagement Corps for continuing to share their knowledge and engage the community in this critically important issue. A recording of this webinar will be made available on the town of Barnstable's website, as well as the STEEP website. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get, well, we actually weren't able to get to all of our questions today, but I see that more questions are coming in, but we're going to have to put them off till another time. So I want you to know that as with this webinar, future webinars will support not only Cape Cod, but also affected communities nationwide by sharing information and offering solutions so that communities can better protect themselves. Thank you and have a good afternoon.